You think it's murder? I mean, clearly it's murder. What can I do to help?
Hello and welcome to the Split Screen Podcast. I am the editor-in-chief of 5 out of 10, Alan Williamson, and I'm joined, as always, by the design editor of 5 out of 10 and majestic master of mayhem, Craig Wilson.
That's Detective Chief Sergeant Private Craig Wilson.
Detective Chief, are you a police officer now?
I think so. I think we've proven by sending each other the notes we made on this game that we're actually pretty well placed to be solving crimes.
So this time we are talking about Her Story, which is a new game what came out a couple of weeks ago. So it's quite unusual for us to actually be recording a podcast about a game that came out in the past decade. So it's a pleasant surprise.
That's all right, because it will take me about a year to edit it, so it'll be back to our usual timeliness.
Good. It'll be in line with the latest Valve release. So yeah, Her Story this week. Next week we'll be covering BioShock, and the week after that will be the original Age of Empires. But for today, we'll try and keep it contemporary. So I played this pretty much the day it came out, because I just got back from Barcelona and I had a day off work, and I went on holiday with Joe Martin, the ex-game journalist, and he said, this game Her Story is coming out. It's by Sam Barlow, who worked on Silent Hill Shattered Memories, and some other interesting story-driven games.
Like Ghost Rider, released in 2007.
Ghost Rider? Is that not you mean the movie starring Nicolas Cage?
He also apparently was the designer on Serious Sam, Next Encounter. That's his early roots.
Fair enough. But, so this came out, and I was like, well, it's only £5, I'll give it a crack. And I sat down for 3 hours to play it, and I could not tear myself away from the computer. And I just about managed to get to the end before my bladder exploded. And then I said, Craig, you have to play this. This is something we can actually record a podcast about. Oh my god, we're putting the band back together.
Well, it was that type of excellent recommendation, which was just a single text which said, play Her Story, talk to no one, read nothing about it.
Only talk to me. I am your friend. Only talk to me.
And so I similarly got back from holiday, picked it up, and just the other night, in fact, sat down and thought, all right, I've heard this is 4 or 5 hours worth, or a couple hours worth.
Yeah,
I'll just sit and similarly, just one session from beginning to end. It is the perfect kind of short story novella game where I think any break in the action, so to speak, would actually diminish quite a lot from it, because you get swept up in it. I found myself completely swept up in it. And it's a very short ride, but very enjoyable one.
So, just to check, did you like this game?
I did indeed like this game.
Good.
I like it from the point of what it does technically, which is actually something very old. It's a full motion video game.
Yeah, back to the 90s.
And I like it from the actual plot, narrative content of the game as well. Like, I enjoyed the story and how I interacted with it and the meta thing. I will make comparisons, of course, to Portal at point.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Only because that's all I can do. But also because it had that...
I was joking about the Valve reference. You're like, and I think you'll find it's a lot like Left 4 Dead, because someone is dead in Her Story. Oh, Jesus, Craig.
Well,
Stop it.
For me, it has... We'll get into that later. I think we should just set up what the general premise of the game is for now. And also, obviously, this is going to be... I say spoiler. We're going to talk about the game. It is a game that is best coming into blind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I said to you, don't read anything about this. Just go and buy it. And if you'd said that was absolute pish, I would have just, PayPal'd you a $5. But I went into it completely blind, and I think I enjoyed it a lot more for that, because you didn't have any presuppositions about what was going to happen. So we are going to talk about it quite frankly. We will discuss the ending and the other various things, even though the ending's a little ambiguous. That's a story in itself. But
I think it's the route towards the ending, and for me, like, I didn't know what the boundaries of the actual game were either, let alone the objective. I mean, we should really just go in from this from a start, middle, and end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Point of view.
But yeah, just to say to anybody who has not played Her Story yet, I think you should pause this podcast and go play it first, because you will enjoy the game more when you get to discover it for yourself.
That being said, general overview, or general premise of the game, you load it up and you're presented with a very old computer interface, and it is a police computer, and there's a program open which searches the archives of the interviews that they've made, of these video interviews, and you can type in a word and it will come back with certain video clips. You watch those clips. All of those clips are the interview of this one woman who is played by Viva Seifert.
Probably shouldn't have tried to mention her name if you couldn't pronounce it. I would have. I wouldn't have tried. But,
well, you see, it's the same woman, and when you load it up, the word murder is populated in the search field, and there's 4 clips, and that starts with the first one, her reporting that her husband is missing, and you see that they're all taken on different days, and as you watch each of the 4 tiny clips, you then ends with her saying something along the lines of,
I'd like to speak to a lawyer now. Please. You have no murder weapon. You have nothing. And all these stories we've been telling each other, just that. Stories.
So that was great. Like, I love that just as the setup of, okay, well, what's the murder, or what's the crime? Is it a murder? How is this person involved? What's the outcome of this? And like, I didn't know what stage we were at. I was convinced at some point in the game it was then going to switch, and I was either going to go back into the interview room, and she was either going to be there, or it was going to be some kind of like, I was like an active part of the investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm almost like being dropped into the case, so it's like, do your backstory, and then there was going to be some flips. So
So you thought this was actively going on? Because it does tell you pretty much in the README file that you're looking through old archives from years ago, and,
exactly.
it is set in the present day. So that's
exactly.
Simply a failure of comprehension in your part.
It possibly is, but I knew it was in the past. I knew it's in the 90s. It's all the video timestamps are in the 94, I think.
Yeah, or sometime in the past. Yeah.
But I expected there to be some kind of, and this is now what you have to do with all this information, and presumably, I'm thinking from a game point of view, like, I want to be thorough here, because I knew it wasn't going to come to some sort of question and answer quiz at the end, and it's like, you got 6 out of 10. Oh, she got away. She's killed again.
Did I ever tell you about Trivial Pursuit for the Master System? Okay, yeah.
That's not set up.
Did I ever tell you about Cluedo for the Super Nintendo? No, it is.
I'll tell you about Ludo on the Game Boy.
So Trivial Pursuit for the Master System. It asks you questions, but instead of getting you to choose the answer with the controller, it pauses. Then it tells you the answer, and it says, "Did you get it right?" And yeah, I always got it right. I was really good at Trivial Pursuit in the Master System. But this doesn't do that. I mean, it drops you in. It gives you the word murder, so you know a murder has occurred, and from that you need to use essentially your Googling skills. That's one of the things I like about it. Is because anybody that can Google can play this game.
It's a Google 'em up. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so you get a few clips from murder, and then if you're like me, you have a little page of notes. I've written down things like, I've got stuff like Simon likes blondes, wrote down some of the clothes he was wearing, Helen the barmaid, Eric and Diane. And it's interesting because all of the things you write down at the start don't really have a lot to do with what's going on, and it's you think you're getting you think you're piecing together what happens, and then gradually evidence starts to get a bit more contradictory. So you might think, oh, I'll search for Simon, then I'll search for Helen, then I'll search for XYZ, I'll search for the Rock, the bar they were at, and sort of works its way out from there, and you're gradually trying to tease your way through these clips and really just make sense of what's happened.
It's the Rockington Arms, the Rock. It's run by a nice couple, Peter and Susan.
And there are certain clips that are more enlightening than others, and then you know that because it triggers a little sequence where you'll see like police sirens going on, or you'll see a reflection of yourself kind of ease back in front of the screen, and that made me jump the first time because I thought it was like a ghost or something.
Exactly.
Coming out of the screen, I went, ah!
So if I'll explain the the portal metaphor now, right, or comparison.
Ah,
now.
yeah, get it out of the way.
Because
Yeah.
for me, there's always like the two stories in a game. I think it's Eric Wolpa is who I've stolen this from. You've got the game story, which is what you're physically doing, how you interact, what the mechanics are, and then you've got the story. So why Portal really works is that the story is that you are a everyone knows the plot of Portal, right?
Yes, yes.
You're someone completing tests for a ruthless AI who's only interested in making tests for you to complete. And then the actual game story is that you're solving these puzzles using the portal gun, developed only so that you can solve puzzles. So there's like a nice alignment between those two. For me, that worked really well here because the game story is that you are a person searching through these video archives. But as much of the game for me took place outside of the PC, and we've both done it. We've both made pretty extensive notes that guided the way we played it, and I just like that so that it's quite easy to align it because it's a PC interface on both sides. But those little moments, the reflection or the police siren, or just the ambient sound of these fluorescent tube lights clicking on and off, completely took me into the story and that world to the point where when once the conclusion reveals itself, the sort of meta, I don't know if it's a meta game, but ultimately the character who you are playing, that gave it such an interesting, satisfying twist that I wasn't expecting.
No, it was yeah, I mean the whole thing was really good, and I did try to turn off the filter effect type stuff, but I ended up leaving it on because I quite liked that grotty CRT feel. I think that you're right that the thing you're doing aligns with what the character's doing a lot better, and that's what really makes it work. I think with a lot of those things, like something like Papers, Please, right? You play a border guard stamping things, but you don't. You know you're still playing a video game, and there's an artifice to it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this, you're doing exactly the same thing that person would be doing. You are working through a computer database and searching for clips, and it's just totally plausible.
Yeah.
If you were in a police station doing that, you'd be carrying out exactly the same actions on the same system. That's what makes it work so well. It is it's like it's the most ungamey way of setting up a game. And okay, I mean you get away with that because you're looking through a video database and a computer, and it doesn't sound particularly exciting. But it's a clever way of setting it up.
But what I find particularly interesting about it, and it's kind of a subtlety, is that you do start off where you reach that conclusion of what your protagonist character is ultimately a different. If you think of where you start from, it's different, right? Because she's going into there knowing what she's looking for.
Yeah, and
knowing the
not,
context of it, and you are ignorant of what this world is and who the characters are.
Yeah, so the character that you play knows the ending before they go in, or at least knows the answer.
Yeah, knows the question that they're trying to answer. And then by the end of the game, you are at that same. You've converged with that character, and you're at that same point. I can't really think of many other games that do that. I'm not saying it's something that needs to be done, but it was just again that what it leaves you on, like the ending of a game, the ending of a story, ending of a movie is so important. I feel like that little neat little ending actually made the game so much more for me as a whole, and I enjoyed the whole thing.
I get it. It would be a bit like if you started playing Gone Home, and you didn't know that you were that girl's sister,
mm-hmm.
and it revealed that at the end. There was an additional layer of connection that you didn't know about. I don't think that works because the way obviously they told the story as if you are this girl and you are going home, and it wouldn't work that way. But it's a similar kind. It would be a similar kind of twist.
Yeah, and you have a literal physical presence and effect in the world in Gone Home, whereas here, like, you have no effect. All you're doing is learning the story. So let's talk about that then, right? Because from a technical point of view, what I found quite cool was because you are searching for keywords to pull up a video, and exactly at the start, like I'm looking at my notes, I had the same notes as you. I wrote down like Simon Ernst, Helen, The Rock,
yep,
Cope, Cavalier, Van, Visa, Diane,
Which of
Glasgow.
your no? Oh, I'm looking at numbered post-it note number 1. Okay, yeah.
Post-it note number 1. And I was writing down these keywords because as you're watching the clips, you're just, and I think it's really, I don't know how, I wonder it must have been quite difficult to do, but to write the dialogue in such a way that they're showing you what the next breadcrumb is.
I love that you're spoiling the fuck out of the game by writing the ending of the game is a note 16. So just gonna flag that up so you don't like set it as the banner image of the website.
Yeah. But that at the beginning we probably went down the same path, but it opens up completely, and then you've really, depending on how you want to approach solving this or carrying on this investigation.
Mm-hmm.
You will completely populate different parts of the story if you imagine it as a timeline.
Right. I feel like we're doing the thing. I feel like we're doing the thing we always do, which is we explain what happens at the end of the game, and we don't put any context, and only people who have played this game. Okay. So the setup is that there are 7 interviews conducted with this woman, and those interviews are split up into lots of different chunks. You can search for terms like, so you could search for Hannah, which is her name. You search for Simon, her husband's name, and the game has the entire transcript of the interview. So you're searching for what she is saying in the interviews. So if you search for Simon, all of the clips where she says Simon will come up. And it's up to you to put in multiple search terms. So you might put in Simon guitar, and that'll come up with all the time she talks about Simon playing the guitar or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And so actually, in terms of the way the game's designed, you've got a script of these 7 interviews, and you can watch them back to back, and people have pieced them together on YouTube. But actually, what makes this a cleverly designed game isn't so much the setting; it is the editing. It's the way that the clips have been fragmented that makes it very, very clever. Because actually, when you think about the way video games are constructed, although they're cinematic, there's not a lot of editing nuance to them, because it tends to go cutscene, it drops you into the game, that goes for as long as it goes. But whenever you're a film producer, the edits are the most important thing. It's those cuts that build up the language of a scene. It's almost like the grammar of the scene, if you like.
Yeah.
And that's how you get from A to B. And so this game is clever, and it works very well because of the way it has constructed those edits and the way it's very carefully designed so you can piece things together. Because you can look at any clip you want. You can type in any word you like from step 1, and you can get to the ending, sort of. But you're going to need to investigate these things, because it never reveals the entire ending in one piece. Even you need to watch 50, 60 clips to piece together the story yourself. And so you almost are like an editor. You're trying to piece together the story and figure out what's being said through the clips. And if you watched all 7 interviews back to front, you probably would figure it out quite quickly. But that's part of the fun, is figuring out where to search and how to piece this story together. That's why we've started making notes, because you couldn't do it all in your head.
And so for me, although there is a kind of end state, because it's ambiguous, like whether or not this woman is telling the truth, and whether or not let's just lay out like I can't talk about this without just doing all the plot stuff, right? So
let's just talk about it. We've already warned people.
So Hannah is the woman who reports her husband missing. She gives an alibi for why she's not involved. It increasingly looks more suspicious. She then begins telling a story about her secret twin sister, Eve, who was taken away at childbirth and raised across the street. Am I remembering that right?
Yes.
Effectively?
Yes. Yeah.
By the midwife in secrecy. And Hannah and Eve would play together and very much do the sister act thing of swapping places. And essentially they try to live one life. And they keep, there's a lot of talk about keeping a incredibly detailed diary. Mm-hmm. So that both of them are very literally on the same page and can hand their life across to the other, and who goes off and lives it for a bit. There's a lot of talk of reflections and then secret codes that they have, where she's tapping out. Is it Morse code? I imagine it's Morse code.
It's a knock code. It's not Morse code.
the twin element then plays into their relationship with Simon, and then there's like pregnancies, there's failed pregnancies, then jealousy enters into it, and then ultimately there's a murder of Simon by Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the interview, then you're kind of left with, it's very much Eve who's talking to you, or giving the interview, saying that you've got the wrong person because Eve is a completely new human being with no record, so you can't pin the murder on her because it was Hannah, who presumably has either fled or is dead. I couldn't tell. There's a lot of ambiguity, I feel, at the end.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people have trouble figuring out is whether it's one person or two.
And
you'll see in page 2 of my notes that is exactly what I was trying to do, because there are 7 interviews. The first 4, I think, are with Hannah, and the last ones are with Eve. And you can tell because Eve plays the guitar, and she also has a tattoo that Hannah doesn't have, and that is... people are like, oh no, it's one person. They've got a split identity, and that made me doubt my own conclusion, because I thought, well, it's 2 people, because you know, one's got a tattoo and one doesn't. Seems pretty clear cut to me. And that I said it was 2 people, and then I spoke to Joe Martin because he played it the same day, and I spoke to Rick Lane as well, and they were like, it's 2 people. It's 2 people. I was like, oh, thank you. I thought I was going mad. I'd gone into NeoGAF and made the mistake of listening to the internet dummies that said it was one person.
Well, you see, for me, I do think you could tell. I don't think it is either way. Like, I think you can draw conclusions that will present a pretty strong argument for both.
It's ambiguous. Like, that's the whole point.
For me, though, playing through it, I never once questioned that it was one person with some kind of split personality.
Well, you never thought it was that?
No, it was
I always thought it was. I always thought it was 2 as well.
I went, oh, it's it's twins, and then they were living the same life, and that conclusion. It was only after finishing the game and reflecting on it, like, went, oh, okay, I guess that could have been an outcome. But I built the evidence, and this is where, because you can search and build the story in a different sequence, I think you will become familiar with your own argument and sort of embolstered by it.
Yeah.
There you go. So I made like specific notes. There's like a very there's a part where she gets asked for coffee.
A black coffee, thanks. No sugar. Sweet enough as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice this? So she gets
she asks for tea
twice.
or coffee, and sometimes she says, one of them doesn't like coffee and one of them does.
Coffee, I guess. Milk and sugar.
Well, yeah, but no. One time she asks for it black, and the other time she asks for it with milk and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
When she says black, she's like, "Oh, I'm sweet enough already," kind of thing. And that could just be a very well prepared split personality, or thought through split personality, however that works. Or that's like the sort of little slip ups that will come up. Mm-hmm. But then, in the same manner, she spills the coffee on herself to go to the bathroom, and she makes many anecdotes of how they would use the bathroom as a point to switch over.
So you think they switched during that interview?
So I then became convinced that they've switched during the interview itself.
I don't know how they could possibly do that, because they're in a police station. How could they do that? You know?
Well, yeah, obviously there's limits to it. But she comes out wearing different clothes, and she says something like, "Oh, lucky I had a spare pair of clothes with me."
No, I'm okay.
I think. Similarly, I seem to remember points where they say she repeats herself, but word for word verbatim, as if it was an agreed line that this is the line for how you respond to where you were when she drove up to Glasgow. But again, those are things where I think I just either it's real or I've just accrued that as filling the gaps in my own theory.
But I mean, the other so there's the two twists to her story, the 2 endings. The first one is you realize, oh, it's not one person, it's 2, and that makes a lot more sense. If you told somebody that right off the bat, then they'd have it solved very, very quickly, I think, because that is part of it. Is she talks about her sister Eve, and you don't think, oh, they're actually like identical twins or whatever. And then twist 2 is that you are Hannah's daughter. That's the character you play. So once you get to a certain part, you solve lots of clues. And then once you have looked at enough clips, which the game deems you to need to look at, this is where the editing comes in again. So I said, right, well, here's a few bits you're going to need to piece together the story. Once you've found all of those, you get a chat window pops up, and that takes you to the end of the game. and your friend or whoever it is says, "Do you understand why your mother did what she did?" And then you go, "Oh, what? What? And then your brain starts to dribble out of your nose.
And I mean, this whole game is, a shining example for less is more.
Yeah.
There's such a wonderful minimalist touch in it. Like even that moment where the chat window comes up, and I was waiting for that. Like I said, I was waiting for the moment where I'm gonna have to go and demonstrate or perform based on what I've seen.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, all right, are you ready? Like, all right, we're going upstairs and we're going into the courtroom or something.
Oh, you thought it was going to go a bit Phoenix, right?
Possibly, yeah, objection. Look at the bruise. Look at the tattoo. And it's a 4-line exchange. She says, "Are you finished? Have you found what you're looking for?" To which you can say yes or no. I said no.
And then she said, "Okay, well, let me know when you have."
Yeah, well, let me know when you have. And then it's that reveal of SB, and you see your username is SB.
Mm-hmm.
And again, then looking back through the videos, you punch in Sarah, and she makes mention of how she wanted to name her child Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And how Hannah didn't want to call her Eve because that name was a palindrome.
And that's the other trick, is that they're both palindromic names. So it does a lot of stuff like that to keep you on your toes.
And that's where I think there is probably a pretty good argument for them being the same person when she talks about playing with, when they would both play in the attic, how she talks about her reflection.
I'm just going to go into Wikipedia to see if people are arguing about this in the talk. Going, it's one person, it's two people, this is rubbish. Okay.
But they describe each other as being their reflection, and when one becomes pregnant, when the other is apparently infertile, she says that she didn't see her reflection anymore, and that's when the relationship really starts to poison and become toxic.
It doesn't actually talk about the plot at all.
That's probably quite good.
Well, I'm just looking at Sam Barlow's development, and he said he'd been let down by L.A. Noire, saying he never felt like he was being an awesome detective, having to read things and follow up threads of investigation.
Completely agree with that.
He thought the Phoenix Wright series did better, but he felt the game was too rigid and tried to make the player feel clever rather than allowing them full freedom to solve cases themselves. And he also cites heavily publicized trials like those of Amanda Knox as inspiration for the game's format, which sounds pretty much spot on.
Yeah. So even when you said that once it gives you that reveal of who you're playing as, once you've solved enough of the puzzles, there is no explicit puzzles like in the game. Like that puzzle exists purely in you, like in your desire to find out what happened to this case.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, it evolved from that just general want to know what's happening, who are the main players in this, and then becoming invested to the point of what's happening. And now I'm left with what is probably the better ending of I yearn for that like concrete conclusion to this.
Yeah.
But it's not going to give me that, and that is going to mean I'm going to think about it more. And
it's
probably
it's better to not have a concrete ending. Absolutely.
There probably is a flaming NeoGAF thread right now.
Oh, there's lots of people saying. This is the Steam discussion in the spoilers thread. There's one called "Why They're Twins." If you believe they were the same person, did Eve kill Hannah? Take it easy, friends. There is no murder at all. It's like, well, that is true. They are actors. No Gladstone Street in Portsmouth. So what? It's fiction. There's also no Hannah and Eve. We're going to get pedantic about it.
She makes mention of Drive. Well, there's little things like that even, where I think if you're probably not from the UK, you might not. You'll draw different conclusions. As part of her alibi, she says that she drove up to Glasgow following one of their fights.
Yeah. Now,
Portsmouth is the very, very south coast of England, just at the cliff edge before humanity falls back into the ocean. And I lived there. It was a wonderful place. And then Glasgow is basically the same thing, but up north. So it's to drive that end to end is what, 9 hours?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
And she just says she drove up and then fell asleep, then drove back. As soon as that was established, and they established that she's in Portsmouth in a completely different clip from the whole Glasgow stuff, that threw that into complete suspicion for me. Whereas before I was like, okay, well maybe she drove to Glasgow. But yeah, there's just lots of little aha moments. And that's
The other thing is that nails they are twinster is the lie detector test, because the only question she fails is when they ask her who she is.
Yes, my name is Hannah Smith. Oh, shit. Sorry.
And then that's one of the weird things. If you're trying to be a completionist, you have to search for yes and no in quote marks. That's what gets you the last block of clips. They're all lie detector questions.
Okay.
It's almost like an Easter egg. But the one question she gets wrong is when they ask her what her name is, and she says, "I'm Hannah," which that was presumably the question she gets wrong.
My name? That was the only question I failed. Your lie detector works.
So there's I guess one of the things we've not mentioned explicitly is that you never hear what the questions are. You only have her responses.
Yeah.
And so there is just a very nice enjoyment in listening to an answer, and then you can realize what the question is, either from her reaction. You could have done this game in different ways, right? You could have been presented with a dialogue tree where you were prompting those questions, and then you would get the response. And I just think of how rote and how dry that would have felt.
That is the LA Noire method, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
I think this is where I totally agree with what Sam Barlow said about LA Noire as a failure. I think LA Noire was a big success at setting the scene of LA. It was very good. Like most of Rockstar's games, it's very good at world building. But actually, the story is pretty bad. The action all kind of falls apart. It's like I've never played GTA 5, but certainly GTA 4 is a brilliant world with a lot of boringness going on inside of it. That's why people play it as a sandbox. But I think like with LA Noire, it was those interrogation scenes and the evidence. It all felt so forced and so fake, and you didn't feel like you were solving the crimes. You felt like it was like a hidden object game where you were trying to find the evidence. And then I found that the interviews were really, really difficult. I know my friend Jake Tucker's written about what it's like to play LA Noire with Asperger's, and he said that he found it very hard to tell what people were thinking and to get through those examinations. And I was like, no, mate, it's nothing to do with the Asperger's. It's to do with the way the game was made, and also the thing with LA Noire was that you could say truth, doubt, or lie. But originally it was meant to be truth, force, lie, and that's why he gets so angry. Whenever he's like, "You didn't do that," it's a very severe way of doubting people.
Yeah, and especially because they try to distill what is a ephemeral thing of being able to read emotions and draw your own conclusions, because they have to distill that into a button press mechanic.
Yeah. Well, why do you think they need polygraph machines that are measuring? I think it's galvanic skin response. So the idea behind a polygraph machine is that it is more stressful for you to lie than to tell the truth, and that stress causes a physiological reaction, which makes your skin more conductive because you sweat more. I think that is basically it in a nutshell. Don't put that as an answer in your criminology exam, but I think that's more or less it. And why do people need that? Because it's very hard to tell what people are thinking. People lie. People have a poker face, and I think to think that you could just motion cap a few actors and you'd be able to tell the truth. It's kind of ludicrous because all of those people are lying in LA Noire, right? They're all actors, so none of them are telling the truth.
And it was one of those games that would kind of loop round in most cases as well. So there wasn't really a failure. Here, there isn't a hard success criteria, right? Like, you could probably hit whatever the keystone clips are in order to get to this chat window ending. But you could have, say, populate all the latter half of the interviews from when she's in the later days, and you'll have a slightly different experience than if you were being very exhaustive. Like, I think I finished it with about 3/4 full of clips found, because there's a DB database checker, which I didn't know what the hell it was until near the end of the game, and which shows you how many clips you found and in what order.
I had just over half of them whenever I got it, I think.
Yeah, okay. So I was going down some fairly
dead end.
Yeah, not dead end. Well, yeah, kind of big dead ends. There came a point I never hit a hard stop at any point, but I do know I was just going more into like the peripheral details of things, and I think the final key piece that fell into place was about the affair that Eve had with Simon,
Mm-hmm.
and how then that was when Eve hit Hannah, or Hannah hit Eve.
Yeah.
And then there was like I'd already had the mirror being the murder weapon at this point. So all I just had was like, I don't know why they've acted like that. Like, I know she's jealous. I know then there's a question mark, and then she kills him with the mirror. I don't know what triggered that actual
It actually
incident.
took me a really long time to figure out what had actually happened to Simon,
Mhm.
because I got so engrossed in the Eve and the twin story, and I never thought to search for something like body, which would have told
Yeah.
me exactly where he was. I had lost, and that's what's cool, is that it's not a who done it, it's a why done it.
Yeah.
It's set up that way right from the start, and I think it's very good at, rather than you start off and you think you're trying to solve a murder, but actually it becomes very, very clear, just the way Barlow cuts the story together, it becomes very clear that you're trying to figure out why she did what she did,
Mhm.
and that's why it's her story. It's not who killed Simon,
Yeah.
because it is about her story, and that's a really interesting bit. I mean, the who done it, if you just search through, did you find that as well? Did you, after the first little while of playing, you were no longer concerned with finding out about Simon, and you just wanted to know about Hannah? Is that how you felt as well, or did you figure it out quite quickly that she had done it and then learned more?
No, I didn't know. I suspected it was either Hannah or Eve. At that point, like initially going through it, I thought it was like a third person. Like you would find another
okay.
person, another character, and it would be them, be it the maid at the rock. Like initially, it was like, oh, that's who Simon had the affair with, and then maybe Hannah, maybe Hannah got jealous.
Because he likes blondes, but the blonde that he likes is Eve in her blonde wig.
Yeah, and so I was always knew it was going to be them, and they mentioned how their parents died from being poisoned by a mushroom, despite her father being an expert mushroom picker. You would know that a death cap is poisonous or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, maybe one of the twins like killed her parents, either because they discovered this other twin and didn't approve, or something. There was, lots of big question marks. Like I say, ambiguous. It's never really answered.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was like an accident, or it was the twin in the attic being jealous of the time that the parents were spending, or who she saw as her true parents. There's lots of points where I thought, like, oh, that's what the story's going to be, and then Simon will play into that as being a similar, oh, he's going to take my twin away from me. So very much the evil twin. Whereas I think they're both compromised characters. They're both Hannah and Eve. Once it made the distinction of Hannah being the good one and Eve being the evil one, and I kind of finished it not really having that concrete a distinction between them. What point did you come across the song?
Oh, this is the weird song about it's supposed to be an old folk song, but then it gets really, really dark as it goes on. Is that the one?
Yeah, it's Oh, the Wind and the Rain.
Yes. Oh, I got it quite early, I think.
Yes.
I could probably look at my achievements, because that has a timestamp and you get an achievement for it. So
okay.
I will load up Steam and I will tell you in a matter of minutes.
So it's on my second post-it note.
Mm-hmm.
And this song, which I'm undoubtedly probably gonna have just played a snippet from now.
There were two sisters came walking by the sea. Oh, the wind and the rain. The eldest one pushed the other one in. Oh, the dreadful wind and rain. See, they both had a love for the
Okay, so you're going to cut it into the podcast.
Yeah, I'll try cut in clips where I can.
Okay. Not too much of it though, because it's really long and repetitive.
No, not the song. I'll do a snippet of the song and then bits of the game as well.
Yeah. Okay.
But the song itself tells a story which is set up like what I thought was going to be an analogy for the whole game.
Okay, so I'll give you the timeline. Is that let's see. I found out about the tattoo at 2:00. I found out about the Wind and Rain ballad at 3:00, and I finished the game at 4:30.
Okay, I
So I
so
don't
it
know when
sorts.
I don't know when I have you ever eaten fennel? That was a weird achievement.
And the last time Simon cooked something off MasterChef, he got the recipe off CFAX, and I did my Lloyd Grossman bit, commenting from the sidelines. I had to find fennel from the supermarket. Have you ever eaten fennel?
So I got that at about 2 o'clock. So I think it must have taken me about 3 hours to play, I would say.
Let's see, what have I got? For me, it was 1.9 hours, so 2 hours. The guitar achievement was my second achievement. I got the fennel one first.
I got
You
that
ever
first
eaten
as well.
fennel?
Yeah.
And then I got the ballad, The Wind and the Rain. But there's lots of stuff in there in that song which appears or which echoes parts of the story, like drowning. And then again, a vixen with blonde hair who leads a man astray. That's something where I think if you wanted they are one person. If you take the song and their obsession with fairy tales and princesses and princes, that's just another like piece of fantasy that she's bought into.
What? So hold on. So you're saying that makes you think that they're not or are the
Well,
same person?
I still think you could go either way. My view is that they are twins because I find that more interesting. Like I like
Yeah,
the idea of
I
it
also
actually being
I
two
don't
different
want.
people.
I think that whole she's a crazy serial killer. She's got multiple personality disorder is a rubbish way of explaining it. It's really cliched, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's just the one I want it to be is it's two people who have coordinated this
Yeah,
life together, and this is just another part of it.
but I think that because you can see if you go to the good old Steam forums, there's so much discussion behind this, and people have my theory. I'm not buying the MPD theories. Why they're
Right.
twins? There's so much discussion about this, and that's because it's ambiguous. It's designed to be ambiguous, and it's better that way because the whole point is you figuring out your own story. The whole point is you trying to piece together what went right. So I think that if there was one set answer that you were looking for, that would make it inherently less satisfying
Mm-hmm.
than just you look for your own clips, you come to your own conclusion, and that is as right as anyone else's.
Yeah.
Because you've all got access to the same information, but the order in which we built our stories changed, and that because it's so ambiguous, because there's so many things going on, those things are naturally going to influence what comes next. Whenever you find out about the Eve revelation, then you start watching through all the old clips, all the way back from the start again, and that's when it becomes really interesting. And if you look at my notes, you'll see Hannah in big letters in the kind of in the middle, and that is because I didn't know what her name was for quite some time, and I knew about Eve much like a long time before I knew about Hannah.
Yeah, I'm reminded. I was listening to an interview with Ken Burns, who's an American documentary maker.
He's the guy behind the Ken Burns effect. He's a famous seriously.
They
He's
mentioned that in the interview.
Yeah,
It's
famous editor and wildlife, or not wildlife, documentary photographer. Ken Burns effect is when you have photos that very lightly glide from one side of the screen to the other with fades and things.
So
that is the Ken Burns effect.
He's a kind of American history author, and in the interview it was interesting because he described how he views history, and he views it not as a linear line, but like looking up at the stars at night, and that you've got all these events which are these different stars. They're concrete things that happened. But then the way we view history is like the constellations, where we connect these discrete events, and we go, these three things now make up the whatever American Depression. These things make up the Arab Spring. But there's things that happen, and then there's the commentary that's associated with it, and how over time those things will change as well. And that's what this game kind of was for me: is collecting all of those stars and drawing the constellations of what the theories were. And then actually, probably over time, it'll either settle into something fairly concrete, or, I'll go into it now that I've kind of finished and read other people's theories and what did other people think.
Mm-hmm.
Ambiguity in a story isn't something that I think often happens in games. I think Braid was probably the last one I saw, which I felt could garner a similar type of discussion, but
yeah.
um.
But I think I think that the fact that it's so ambiguous is almost to its detriment.
Yes.
The twist at the end of Braid is very clever, but then not having any kind of resolution, I find unsatisfying. But I think this is a definitive answer to it, and that is satisfying. If you couldn't walk away from this with an answer, then you wouldn't feel like a right detective.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the whole point. Is that this is why L.A. Noire is unsatisfying, because you're not figuring out that story. That's why Phoenix Wright, again, you're on a bit of a clue hunt. This one, you can root out things and you can solve the puzzle to an extent. But I think your constellation analogy is really apt. It's a bit like join the dots, but somebody has removed the numbers from the dots, and you can make any tapestry you want.
Yeah. And then it's up to you whether or not you incorporate those new dots into existing images, or whether they become discarded and they're outliers.
Just turn them into small shapes of cats and dogs and stars.
Put little wings on it as the fly.
Have you got any final thoughts? Because I feel like we've had a good short and snappy discussion.
We've spent probably half as long as I did talking about it as I did playing the game. But just on a final thought, because we've mentioned detective games. For me, this is an excellent sort of detective game. But the best one that I've played remains Blade Runner, and that captures a lot of what we've spoken about in terms of drawing your own conclusions. Although it conceals its mechanics and through it's quite a kind of complex system, but you are collecting clues and analyzing clues and drawing conclusions. The game does give you those recognition moments of like, yes, you have found a key moment, and you have to find certain key moments to progress the story. It's not as completely open-ended, or this almost like open world as this is, where you can set off in any direction. But Blade Runner did everything that I was hoping that L.A. Noire would do, and L.A. Noire did barely anything of what I loved about Blade Runner.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed L.A. Noire for what it was, but when I got to the end, I thought, I'm not playing that again. That was a long 30 hours. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I can directly compare it to. And I like it for its freshness, in the same way that a lot of the games that stick in our minds, like the surprisingly good games, like your Portals and your Braids. I really like those games for their freshness, but I'm not looking forward to whenever this gets ripped off and appropriated to an extent. It's fresh now, but I wouldn't want to see a raft of FMV games because I don't think they'd be done quite as well. It's not. I think it's not a good game because it is novel. It's a good game because it has been edited very, very well. And that to me that's what makes it a well-designed game. Is the way those clips are chopped up. That's the stroke of genius behind it, and that is why it is good. And you're not just as you say, working through text conversations or watching 7 linear interviews, and it goes, "Did you get it?" Because if you think about old FMV games like Night Trap and things like that, those are linear stories. And don't know if you ever played Night Trap, but the idea was you were trying to protect these kids in a house from being abducted by monsters, and you cut between various cameras and launch traps and things, but that's a linear timeline. And it's a bit like Five Nights at Freddy's, right? Like, that's not an FMV game, but the similar cutting between cameras thing.
I had that down as as probably the most recent and or closest comparison to this game. Completely different in tone and objective, but yeah, it felt like a Five Nights at Freddy's.
But I also like that you're not sure if her story is a horror game or not, and actually you're not sure if it's going to be a scary game or not, because it's very ominous. And a lot of the music, the ambient music, is quite ominous, but it's not. It's not really. It's not a horror at all. I know I've got a couple of friends who don't play games but like films, and I'm very interested to see what they think of it.
Yeah, it is. I'm not one who likes to play the argument of video games are great because they can do this thing that no other medium can do, therefore they are better. Yeah. But you couldn't tell this story in a book or a film.
No, you couldn't.
Or through audio. The whole beauty of it is that being able to piece together the mosaic in whatever way you happen to come across it.
I think in movie terms, the closest thing is obviously something like Memento or Irreversible, where you do have a non-linear plot. Memento would be the obvious one, but again, it's a linear story being told backwards.
Yeah, it's a non-linear plot, but a linear experience. I think someone described it as the difference between plot and story, but I forget which is which.
So. Almost or Pulp Fiction, I guess. If you're going to look at non-linear vignettes you have to piece together.
Yeah, but it would almost be as if you could watch all of John Travolta's bits first, and then bits of Bruce Willis's stuff, and you could completely lose the pacing. Well, you would lose completely the pacing of it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be quite as good. But
yep.
Speaking of pacing, I think we've reached the end of this.
Oh yeah.
So you can follow us on Twitter. We're at SplitScreenNet. You can like us on Facebook. Don't know why you would, but you can. And you can find lots of writing from ourselves at split-screen.net. Or you can go to 5out10magazine.com and buy the magazine. And that's probably preferable. Yeah, do that.
Yeah, you can go to either the Patreon and support us through that way. You can buy individual issues, or you can go to the website and get free lovely desktop wallpapers, which are coming out every month. Sometimes at the start of the month, sometimes a week after when I go, oh shit, I forgot to do one for this month.
Yeah, Craig's not great with dates. He famously messed up the release date for the Orange Box, so it's like we see our desktop calendars like Her Story as being non-linear, and you can approach the days in any order you like.
Yes, and in honor of that, I will be releasing this podcast as 16 fragmented clips.
That happened before. I can't believe that we recorded a podcast once and it chopped your stream into 40 parts. We could have done Her Story 2 years ago.
Really? Okay. Here's the rest. Oh, they laid a body on the doctor drum. Oh, wind and the rain. Till a fiddler with a fiddle came walking by. Oh, the dreadful wind and rain. And he made a fiddle bow of her long hair. Oh, the wind and the rain. Yes, he made a fiddle bow of her long blonde hair. Oh, the dreadful wind and rain. And he made fiddle pegs of her finger bows. Oh, the wind and the rain. Yes, he made fiddle pegs from her finger bows. Oh, the dreadful wind and rain. And he made a fiddle out of her breastbone. Oh, the wind and rain. The sound could pierce her heart of stone. Oh, the dreadful wind and rain. But the only tune that the fiddle could play was oh, the wind and the rain. Yes, the only tune that the fiddle could play was oh, the dreadful wind and rain. Anything you sing may be used as evidence against you.